Hello. Welcome, everyone, to our chat today. I brought you, in our line of commenting on books, one of the most beautiful things I have ever seen in my life, which is this book, The Maxims of Tahotep. I brought it because I know you would ask me about the publisher and whatnot, but the fact is that I don't know of this book in other languages. It might already be translated by someone, but personally, I'm not aware of it. This is a Spanish publisher called Seeking Wisdom, and there is an introduction by the historian and novelist Christian Jack. The Maxims of Tahotep are writings that are compared, for example, to the Eastern Tao Te Ching by Christian Jack himself. They are a set of moral maxims of incredible beauty. And it highlights a curiosity that I've often pointed out to you. That from a moral, psychological, and spiritual standpoint, we haven't necessarily advanced. In some areas, we've even regressed. Christian Jack himself, as a commentator on some of the chapters of this book, says, look at this, the type of behavior advocated by the Vizier Tahotep 2,500 years before Christ is still not practiced in our days, including when it deals with things that were very revolutionary at that historical moment, but were very present and normal in Egypt, such as respect for women and many other things. Basically, the maxims of the Vizier Tahotep are precious for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's a moral code of impressive beauty. It is basically moral philosophy, how to live in society by following the laws of Maat, the rules of Maat, which is like the Dharma for the Egyptians, the great law, the great rule that governs the universe. Secondly, why? It is intact, this papyrus. So, this Pris papyrus was found by Pris himself, a French engineer who lived in the city of Cairo. In 1850, it was purchased on the streets of Cairo. Now, imagine buying something from someone in the middle of the street, without any certainty of its value or authenticity. Evidently, it must have been purchased for a negligible price, a document that is 4,500 years old in our time. In other words, a document from the ancient Egyptian Empire. The Pris papyrus is nothing more than the entire book of Tahotep, which is a somewhat rare fact. That such an ancient document like this papyrus has remained whole, intact, up to our days. And it becomes even more intriguing when you realize, throughout the book itself, that Tahotep dreamed that his maxims would reach posterity. At various moments, he dreams of this being in the hands of posterity, dedicating his work to future generations. And so here we are at a very distant posterity, a time span of 4,500 years, having access to this and recognizing its value, and being able to question our initial premise. From a technological and material standpoint, in terms of means, we have advanced tremendously. Now, from the standpoint of principles and ends, we are far behind what is advocated within a maxim of Tahotep, that is, far behind 4,500 years. It gives a lot to think about, folks. It's very beautiful, it's very interesting, and I hope to share with you my enthusiasm for this book. Some time ago, I was gifted this book with the intention of exploring it, and now we have the opportunity to discuss and get to know the Pris papyrus, which contains, in its entirety, the maxims of the Vizier Tahotep. The wise one, the great Vizier, who left his teachings for the future and dreamed of a future that would read and live by his life lessons. Shall we get to know it? So, just reinforcing some points we've already discussed. Tahotep, first of all, his name means Ta, the god, Ta the builder god, the blacksmith, protector of builders. Especially those who built the pyramids and stone temples, the god Ta and the name Hotep, which means peace or completeness. Therefore, Tahotep means the peace or the fullness of Ta. Like a divine builder who shapes celestial forms and brings them into the world, this book of moral precepts aimed to bring Tahotep's work to fullness. The very name of this vizier seems to have predestined this man to this, to realize, to bring to fullness the work of Tahotep, which is nothing more than materializing the world of ideas that Plato spoke of much later, the world of artisans, archetypes, or whatever you prefer to call them, on earth. In other words, the precepts of heaven, as Confucius would say, on earth. To build a bridge between these two worlds. He lives during the 5th dynasty of Egypt. And today there is a controversy among archaeologists about the papyrus itself, about the way it is written within this Pris document. If it is indeed from the time of Tahotep, some say it is not. They claim it is from the Middle Kingdom, some good time later, a few hundred years after. But if it is from the Middle Kingdom, it is certainly a copy of the original papyrus of Tahotep that was in the site of the one who made the replica. Tahotep existed. His tomb has already been found in Saqqara. Although there are some who say there's no way to be sure if it's his or not, because there were many Tahoteps within that historical context. But the fact is that his existence seems very certain historically. Therefore, it is very likely that if the Pris papyrus is not contemporary with Tahotep, it is a replica of that earlier papyrus, which was still very likely to be in plain sight for many to see. So, he used to work for the pharaoh of Djedker-Isisi. This was the 5th dynasty of the Old Kingdom of Egypt. Djedker-Isisi was also a name full of symbolism. Well, first of all, comes Jed, and this used to mean pillar of stability, which is the first part of his name. Therefore, his name as a whole meant stable is the creative power of divine light. The creative power, which we will see they called Ka, and Jed formed the beginning of his name. He was then called Djedker-Isisi, the pharaoh whom Tahotep served. Tahotep demonstrates how it was natural at that time to have great devotion to his pharaoh, not for the individual person themselves, but for the authority that this position carried. The pharaoh was a representative of the gods, the one who bridged the gap between heaven and earth. Therefore, the investiture of the position of pharaoh was like a representative of Ma'at, the divine law, responsible for implementing it within a specific body of human beings, a particular human group. Hence, Tot, throughout, refers to his pharaoh with great respect. He is always very grateful and always says that all his knowledge came from him. Understand, it's not about the physical man who was there, but about the channel that a pharaoh is, the position he holds. The respect for that position which was sacred. Today we have a lot of difficulty understanding this idea of a sacred position. For example, in past generations, perhaps some of you have experienced this, students would stand up when a teacher entered the classroom. And then people with our critical and iconoclastic mindset today say, oh, there are no teachers, few deserve that. It doesn't matter if the person deserves it or not, the position deserves it. A teacher is a sacred profession, one that brings to light what the best in a human being, educer, which is the root of education. Therefore, it is in itself an investiture. Whether the man in that position is worthy or not, that's his problem. Our challenge is to position ourselves respectfully before this investiture. And Egypt knew this very well. We sometimes find, within our current society, fragments of this wisdom, little lost pieces here and there, that we often underestimate today, considering it something outdated, because we no longer understand its meaning, where it came from, and what purpose it served. Well, he was buried, as we've already mentioned, in Saqqara. The mastaba number 62 is probably the place where he was laid to rest, which is a mastaba that today lies in ruins, but you can still see the grandeur of what it once was. In other words, the regard with which this man was treated in ancient Egypt, the importance he held. Moreover, a great servant of Ptah, the builder god, the great organizer, the moralizer, the vizier who dealt with the economy, addressed issues of justice, and handled educational matters as well. Therefore, he was like a prime minister in service to the pharaoh. Therefore, the dedication expected of a vizier was that he had no personal life, that he was completely devoted for the good of that human group. And every day he reported his work to the pharaoh. He would present himself before the pharaoh to see if he was deemed worthy. In other words, he had to always be transparent, always very pure, and always doing everything without reservations, nothing personal, without any particular interest. In other words, a vizier was a very special man. There is no shortage of mentions of others in history who also played very special roles, despite Ta having such a prominent role. Moving on, what else do we have that's interesting before we delve into the maxims? Well, the term used for this type of literature was called sapiential literature. In other words, the literature of the wise. And this came from an Egyptian word, which was sebate. Well, Seba or sebate, it is suspected that from there came the Greek sophos, the Sabian, the Chaldean. And even the word wise in our Portuguese or Castilian language, and many others that come from similar roots. In other words, wisdom might even have, in its original word, in its etymology, some connection to the Egyptian language. Moreover, I find that very interesting. Ancient Egypt seems destined to be associated with wisdom, although that would be through its vernacular. Therefore, the image refers to the hieroglyph that represented Seba or Sebate, which was an ancient door behind which was a 5-point star, symbolizing the star Sirius. Look how interesting! A door that seemed to have the star Sirius behind it. The star seeking wisdom, the 5-pointed star, which is very similar to the pentalpha of Pythagoras and many other appearances it has made throughout history. The Vitruvian man, always representing this idea of the fifth element, which is human consciousness, reigning over the quaternary of personality. There, with other names, but also a very similar idea. In other words, it was a symbol of a door that you must pass through to reach yourself, the fullness of the human condition. And this symbol corresponded to wisdom. Therefore, if you want to visualize wisdom through the eyes of an Egyptian, it is a 5-pointed star behind a door. I found it very suggestive and beautiful. As I mentioned to you, the Pris Papyrus, where the maxims of Tahotep are found, consists of a prologue, 37 maxims, and a long epilogue. The epilogue is so long that it is divided into 9 other chapters. Obviously, I couldn't cover all of this in a single lecture. That would make a course, and I don't know how long it would take. So I picked a selection, and the selection always depends largely on the criteria of the person making the selection, so I don't intend for it to be perfect, but it is a sample of something so that you can more or less understand the tone of this book, the tone of these maxims, and the intention of its author. And it is a legacy for us, one that we can come to know and claim as our own, dignifying it with our consciousness, our attention, and the value we can attribute to it. Through knowledge. As Tahotep himself said, the greatest honor you can give to knowledge is to understand it deeply. And surely he would expect this from his descendants, from the posterity he spoke so much about. So, after the prologue, there's something interesting, because the book is renamed. Christian Jacques himself refers to this central part of the book, which are the maxims, as the maxims of the fulfilled word. Obviously, you have to see that this was taken from hieroglyphics, and there are possible interpretations. Other interpreters might have taken different exceptions. This is very variable. In fact, in the version of the book I read, when it presents an interpretation, it compiles it at the bottom in the notes. 3 or 4 different interpretations, so you can make your choice, which I found very well done and interesting. But then the core of the book, the essence, which are the maxims, would have this name, the maxims of the fulfilled word. As if our life as a whole were a word, and when it is fulfilled, you realize the existence of a true human being. You cross the doors that lead you to the 5-pointed star. I found it very suggestive and beautiful. Well, the Pris Papyrus, as I mentioned to you, came from a man who, interestingly, Émile Preside of Venice was a Frenchman, and he wasn't exactly a historian or an archaeologist. He was a French engineer, draftsman, painter who decided to live in Egypt, in Cairo, for some time. And he had the privilege of having access to this papyrus sold on the streets. Without knowing what it was about, he bought it, and he saved a document of inestimable value. And this document contained not only the maxims of Ptahhotep, but also a part of the instructions of Khejmeni, which is another ancient papyrus. There were 2 pages of these instructions, and the rest was the entire sequence of Ptahhotep's maxims. The introduction of the book mentions that Ptahhotep, according to him, was already a man of 110 years. And it's so interesting because he is so humble. I can't say if this number is symbolic or real. But the fact is that in the introduction, in the prologue, he addresses the pharaoh, speaking about how he found himself limited by his old age, and how he feared that this knowledge would be lost. He wanted to fulfill the duty of passing on this teaching he received, enriched by his own life experiences, to future generations. And he goes on to describe a bit about the state of his body, as if he were one thing and his body another. My mind remains lucid and alive, but my body becomes sluggish, feels great pain when getting up, when lying down, and constantly loses memory. Therefore, while my mind remains lucid, I want to give this wisdom. Therefore, he presents himself to the pharaoh and speaks of his intentions in this prologue, expressing his desire to pass on the moral values and teachings he had received to future generations, and that's why he writes. And before making it public, he submits it again to the pharaoh. The pharaoh approves, as you'll see in the epilogue, and only then does he communicate to others, making his document public. And the document speaks, above all, about human virtues. It will talk a lot about truthfulness, love for truth, respect for the law, self-control, and goodness. It constantly relates life activities, simple activities like attending a banquet. In the house of a great man, or, I don't know, participating in a negotiation or a debate, it will always relate this to the great rule of the universe, which is Maat. Maat is not just the goddess, although she is also that, but Maat is understood somewhat like the Dharma of the Hindus. It's that law that permeates the universe and gives it meaning. And everything that is productive, everything that is useful, everything that makes a difference is what aligns with Maat, with the great rule. It is she who gives life and meaning to all things. I, who am so fond of Indian tradition, always talk to you about an epic called the Ramayana. The Ramayana is also a hymn of love to Dharma. Dharma is nothing more than the name for Maat in Indian tradition. It is the great law, the arm of God extended over the cosmos. So, the main protagonist of this work by Pita is the rule of Maat. You will see that she is constantly referenced, and she is the great balance that determines the truthfulness, the usefulness, the meaning of everything that is done. Midineder. These 2 words in Egyptian meant the word of God. It's interesting that the word midu also meant staff, a support staff, like a cane. So, they believed that a man who somehow becomes unbalanced, who somehow feels fragile in the face of the world and its circumstances, can lean on the words of God, that is, the words of truth, which is another very strong and interesting detail, folks. The way the word is treated in this book, the word is a highly sacred content that cannot be profaned, cannot be disrespected. We must not wound silence with trivialities. And how to keep silence is something precious at the right moment. And how to know how to use words. This is one of the important themes of the maxims. Champollion used to say that everything was a hieroglyph in the life of the Egyptians. And the truth is, everything in their lives was symbolic. So he would say, a pyramid is a great hieroglyph, a mastaba, any construction, any temple. It wasn't just a physical place to do things inside or to decorate on the outside. It was a symbol. in such a way that people passing by would receive a message. Everything in the life of an Egyptian was a hieroglyph, meaning it was a symbol to be read. They didn't build things that had only a sensible meaning, but also an intelligible one. A body not only material, but also spiritual. Everything was a message, everything was a teaching. And it still is to this day. It's fascinating how, despite all the cycles that time has lived through, many of these things still stand and continue to deliver their message to the future. As they say in Cairo, everyone fears time, but time fears the pyramids. A man who left a historical footprint like this, bordering on eternity, must have known a lot about the subject of eternity. And the proof of this is right in front of us to this day. Magnificent constructions, despite the whole set of predatory centuries that have passed through there. Mut, then, is the eternal rule. The rule that gives the right measure to the life of all beings, of the cosmos, of manifestation. And to walk well consists of aligning oneself with it. And with this knowledge, let's move on to the maxims. The first key maxim is essentially to seek an inner disposition that ensures our success. And this inner disposition has a name: humility. Neither in success, nor in failure, nor in any circumstance. Let our wounded pride, our exalted vanity, not make us lose humility. Humility is the key word, since we do nothing in our own name. We are channels through which bad art manifests in the world. Therefore, we are mere channels that must be kept clean and unobstructed, so that the law can pass through us and reach the world. Therefore, maintaining humility, wisdom, and the clarity to know that we serve something much greater than ourselves gives us meaning. If we wanted to serve something as vulnerable, fragile, and fleeting as our personality, our external name, we wouldn't have much meaning in time or history, nor would we have any measure of truth. The measure of truth in our existence lies in the fact that our inner name is Mut. Deep down, our essence is the Mut that flows within all of us. And so I brought a passage from this first maxim for you, which says the following: let your heart not be proud because of what you know. Seek advice from the ignorant and from the wise. And this is very beautiful, meaning, at all times, the spirit of a learner who knows that every human being holds some precious teaching that can add great value to the ears of a wise person. It reminds me a lot of Scandinavian mythology, much later, where Odin, or Wotan, the great god, wandered everywhere asking everyone everything. He would also send his 2 ravens to do the same and report back to him. He was a god, the supreme god of Valhalla, who nonetheless went around asking everyone everything and listening attentively to their answers. And that's why he was a sage, in other words, an Egyptian sage. Or, seeking wisdom, had this same concern. Ask the learned the ignorant, the wise, and learn from everyone. Be humble and seeking wisdom to serve not yourself, but the law that governs and organizes the universe, and eternally have the spirit of a learner. This is already the first maxim. It starts just like that. Let's go. Second maxim, second, third, and fourth. Christian Jack makes a joint commentary on them, which I found interesting, so I decided to do the same because they are very similar. It talks about the art of debate. For those who enjoy oratory, who appreciate debate, the treatment given to words in this tradition is quite interesting. The art of debate and the use of good words. The use of good words is the foundation of all social architecture. Words build in the subtle realms what will become the concrete works of tomorrow. In other words, if we look at the works we have in society today, they are a realization of the way we use words. Therefore, if we have things that are made with minimal cost for maximum profit and are quickly crumbling over our heads, so are our words. This is a reflection, a realization of the tone of men's words. Therefore, if you look at Egypt and the trail they left in history, imagine what their words were like. He says that to use good words, one must have self-control, know how to use silence, and be adaptable. In other words, knowing how to interact with any interlocutor in front of you, encouraging him to bring out his best to light and learning from everything he has to offer, encouraging him to express what he has that is best, and learning from everything that can be enlightening. Bad words will reveal their speaker to all. Therefore, do not counter people who are speaking bad words. Know how to maintain a silence that is not pedantic, but discreet and circumspect, allowing the words themselves to speak for the person. There is no need to worry about revenge or countering bad words. They will fall into discredit by the very life of the one who utters them. Because this was very common in Egypt. Words were not considered if they were not in comparison with the life of the one who uttered them, if they were not empty words, devoid of experiential content. And the second maxim, the second chapter, says the following: do not wash, or rather, do not unload your heart because of those who oppose you. In other words, don't unload, don't lose control, don't pour out revolt. Even if the words are infuriating, don't pour out indignation. Even if the other person's words are capable of making us indignant, do not wash away, do not throw what is worst in you onto others. Know how to maintain silence and trust in the rule of the world. Knowing how to trust the great rule. This reminds me of a work, something that is much later. So I refrain from always making the citation. A passage from Count Augustine, where he said that revenge is a form of unconscious atheism. When we want to take revenge for something wrong that someone does, we think the universe is chaos, and that if we don't take justice into our own hands, it will go unpunished. If we do not believe in order, we do not believe in God. So, he makes it clear, do not interfere. The life of the citizen will testify to the quality of their words. Know how to maintain a discreet, circumspect silence without any arrogance. The fifth maxim will talk about the leader, about the ruler, about the one who directs. It's not just here. You'll see that he touches on this subject in many others. He says the following: the first thing is evident. A leader is exemplary in following the rule, mat, the great law. He is exemplary. His life entirely aligns with it. Otherwise, he is not fit to lead. One cannot be the guide of a group if they themselves are lost. In other words, if I lead a group, I must know the way. If I am as lost as they are, that is not a guide, that is not a leader. Iniquity and disorder, which in Egyptian meant Isfet, find their preferred terrain the world of quantity and the crowd. Look how interesting this is. Many times I have talked to you in our live sessions about massification, about the tendency towards the crowd, towards massification, which thinks in blocks, which thinks according to trends, where individuality does not exist. He says, look, in these environments, precisely where there are no wise individuals, where mat does not reign, in these environments of the crowd, is where iniquity finds its cradle. Because when a person is not able to be conscious of their role and the need to recognize the order of the universe and place themselves in service to it, they will inevitably become an agent for something else. If it is not of order, it is of disorder. If it is not of mat, it will be of Isfet, iniquity and disorder. Where is there irrationalism? Where is there a crowd? Where is there quantity? I always tell you that nature works with quality, not quantity. And here we have yet another proof of that. It also says in this chapter that humanity will disappear and the rule will remain. And that the rule existed long before humans did. That the rule is the law of ordering manifestation. Without it, there would be no manifestation. Without it, there would be what we call the cosmos. So, the rule precedes and succeeds human existence. The rule is a manifestation of God. It is the realization of divine attributes that organizes and gives meaning, directing everything that has been created. Therefore, there is no way to go against it. It is inexorable. It is, I repeat, like the arm of God manifested in the world. A passage from this fifth maxim says the following: he who acts wrongly says, I acquire for myself. He does not say, I acquire for the benefit of my function. Do you see how interesting that is? He who acts poorly, his intention behind everything is not to serve the whole, but to take advantage for himself. They said this was a deviation from the fundamental law of the universe, which is selfishness. Whereas he who acts well acts for the benefit of his role, his mission, his place in the world, as a human being capable of understanding the laws and executing them to the best of his ability. Capable of aligning his life and, through his example, the lives of many, with the great law of the universe. He who places his own interest at the center of the universe is a man who serves disorder and chaos. He who places the law at the center of the universe is a man who tends towards order, harmony, and adds value to the world. Continuing, the sixth maxim, respect others and do not enrich yourself at the expense of others. In other words, do not use others as means. Kant also talked about this. Who knows how much time later? It's not a long time. I'm not going to calculate that now. But Kant said that it is immoral to treat human beings as means and not as ends in themselves. We can't say how this information was passed down, how it echoed into the future. But the truth is that in every corner, in all traditions, there are echoes of this same wisdom. Whether it was a transmission of this wisdom or if there were other sources, that is to be discussed in another setting. But it is true that we find it in many places. Be content with what you have. Only the divine will is fulfilled, not human machinations. I find this last part wonderful, folks, and it's in the passage I selected. Do not engage in a scheme against the human species, for God punishes such actions. In the end, you can ask, you can scheme, you can plan, you can do whatever you want. Human machinations do not prevail in history. It is the divine will that prevails. That uses the tools that exist here and there and shapes the course of history to move in the direction chosen by the great law, by Mott. In the end, it is in her hands that history lies, and all human machinations, consciously or unconsciously, end up fitting within this law. In other words, if you're heading in one direction, but your destiny, in quotes, is to go elsewhere, if you have something to accomplish there, someone comes along and gives you a push. This person may have bad intentions, may be lost, but unconsciously they served Mott, because they took you from here and pushed you there. In other words, we are either conscious agents of history through our virtues, or unconscious agents of others' history through our flaws. Of course, the first case is much more preferable. But deep down, God's will ultimately always prevails, even using our mistakes as tools. 10th maxim. In moments of weakness and unrest, follow a person of quality. He always talks about this idea of being a person of quality, chosen for what they made of their life. In other words, a person of quality isn't measured by how much they've read, how much they've studied, or how many titles they hold, but how much he has experienced this in his life and consolidated and integrated it as his own response. How much he has integrated this into his identity. Therefore, if we feel lost, it is quite fitting to have what they called a master. Someone who guides you, someone who directs you. But it's essential to know how to recognize a person of quality. You don't recognize this through a resume, but rather through the journey. In other words, by the quality of life. How coherent was it with the law? How coherent it was with the divine will, how coherent it was with the life intended for a human being. Once again, quality, not quantity. It is God who shapes a person of quality. Those who follow a mediocre person will be mediocre as well. It's evident. I find this part beautiful, that God shapes a person of quality. In other words, a person of quality stands before nature and says, I want to serve. And his willingness to serve makes the very law guide this man in a direction where his rough edges are smoothed out. And he keeps growing and perfecting himself for one reason only, because of his dedication, his desire to serve. Literally, I brought to you that it is God who makes a person of quality special and protects them, even while they sleep. Why? Because he allowed God to do so, he put himself in service. Now he is entirely shaped by, well, he walks in the direction of the law, and the law does the rest. It makes him polish his rough edges to pass through all the gateways that stand in the way and becoming ever greater. In other words, growth is above all a matter of discernment and decision. To what or whom do you serve? And within Egypt, there was a lot of this, choosing a person of quality to guide you on your path, not to tell you what you have to do, but to illuminate possibilities, to give you direction. Continuing, the 11th maxim. As I already mentioned to you, I skipped a few, obviously, yet there are still many. The heart, the idea of the heart as the consciousness of the essential, the perception of the divine, and the desire for spirituality. The heart is associated with the essence, the center, the deepest spiritual identity of the human being, which is what defines all things. It is the one that is sensitive, not only to the stimuli of the earth, but also to the decrees of heaven. The heart shows the path to the rule and of eternal life. In other words, the heart was like a vessel capable of holding the sacred. In fact, in the weighing of the heart of the deceased, we see there in the duet, on a scale of Mott, a feather on one side and the heart of the deceased on the other. In other words, the heart in the form of a vessel with two little handles. It is a vessel that contains the most sacred identity, the essence of the human being. And we've talked a lot about this in other lectures. I don't know if you've had the chance to listen. We talked about this so-called heartache that we sometimes feel. When our conscience shows us that our day wasn't truly human, not 100% human, that we often trampled over the path that was expected of us. Many times we trample over the great rule, and that hurts. It hurts in such a way that it demands we stand before our heart and seek redemption. So, this idea of the heart comes from far back, but it seems one of its most precise addresses is here in Egypt. The idea of the heart as the center, as the human essence, as the seat of the divine within us. Like the vessel that holds within itself the sacred portion of man, his divine essence. Literally, follow the heart during the time of your existence. Wasting the moment of action of the heart is an abomination of Ka, the creative energy. Perhaps you have already seen the hieroglyph of Ka. They are two arms. It's a horizontal line with two arms turned upwards. The Ka is the creative energy that emanates from the heavens to the earth, meaning it emanates from the divine law of the universe over all beings. That servant, this Ka is only multiplied when it is used again in the direction of these hands, towards the sky. In other words, in the sense of elevating, enlightening beings, illuminating paths. Otherwise, this energy is wasted. One of the great deviations from the law, from the rule, is to waste an energy that is not yours, that was given to you to be used in the betterment of the path of humanity, so that they could come closer to their human path, closer to fulfilling the Mat. So, the economy of Ka, the respect for Ka, the rightful direction of Ka, is like if I gave you the responsibility of mentoring a child. And you have to be a trustworthy guardian, providing him with the necessary energy, the necessary education so that he grows and flourishes as a good person. Thus, it is energy, it is life that was given to you. This energy is not meant to be used for just anything. This energy has a purpose, to build a bridge between heaven and earth. And the misuse, the poor management of public resources, as we say nowadays, is considered a great deviation from Mat. 12th maxim. This 12th maxim states that only a righteous man, a trustworthy man, can have a spiritual child, which is a disciple. That's quite beautiful too. Of a righteous man who is approved. According to the decrees of heaven, that is, according to alignment with Mat, this person has the right to have close to them a pure heart, in which they can plant the seeds of their wisdom. I believe that a physical child, a child of the body, does not depend on the man, but a spiritual child depends on the divine. It is created and offered by God Himself, so that its impulse is not lost on earth, so that it can be transmitted. Be a good and righteous man, and you may one day be called to have a spiritual child, a disciple. Literally, only the help of God allows a wise man to discover a spiritual child. In other words, it's not even his choice, only God's help, only the discernment that comes from this divine heart allows you to enlighten someone and see that there is fertile ground where your seed will not be desecrated, where your teaching can be deeply understood and transmitted. Deep understanding is something that is incredibly sacred and will be the subject of some maxims ahead. That fertile ground which demands deep understanding and reaches it to some extent. This is the beloved spiritual child of the gods. Continuing, the 14th maxim, which is the path of the heart and the path of the womb. This is very interesting. So, it's as if you have a division here. Some traditions speak of this, Dharma as the great divider. It's like the centaur, human above, animal below. In Egypt, they spoke of the path of the heart, where spirituality and the divine meaning of human life reside, the sanctification of life, and the path of the womb, which works only for passions, instincts, and selfish interests. And it says that these are two poles constantly fighting against each other, and one must know how to deal with these two poles. One must reach the heart, but not boast about it. In other words, the man who reaches fulfillment on the path of the womb is always vain. The man who reaches fulfillment on the path of the heart, in other words, a wise man, is always humble. The more wisdom one has, the more humble they are, because now he knows it doesn't belong to him. He knows whom he serves. He no longer takes possession of things. He is simply a transmitter. He is a mediator of wisdom that is much greater than himself. Therefore, he is a humble man. Whereas those who are rewarded and successful in mere survival, which is the function of the womb, are always vain, arrogant, and always boast of a superiority that doesn't exist. Those who listen to the womb lose the heart. That's what can truly be lost. Excessive attention. The so-called language of the womb, which is selfishness, self-centeredness. Interest in everything for myself, interest in my passions, only interest in the tangible pleasures and not the intelligible ones, turning only to what is dense, heavy, and fleeting. This can silence the language of the heart for all that life. That man no longer knew how to connect with his heart, which is a very curious thing, a powerful experience. Closing the doors of your heart in such a way that it no longer has any contact with you for your entire life. What becomes of the life of such a man? But here Egypt talks about this, and it's not the only occasion they speak of. I've seen this in other papyri. This man becomes a slave to his own compulsions. And here, literally, the 14th maxim says, the heart of those who listen to their belly disappears. This will arouse disdain instead of love. Having a great heart is a gift from God. In other words, as God uses this heart so much, it expands this path and makes it ever larger. By serving so much, by transmitting a pure message through my heart, this message widens this channel, and I have an ever-growing heart. And then the possibility of true love, which, mind you, is denied to men who live by the doctrine of the womb. They have passions. True love. It wouldn't be an option available to this type of life. 17th maxim. Talk a little about the judges. By the way, this book has so many interesting things about various professionals within society. More than once, he talks about the judge. The judge, when someone comes to him, has a role. Purges the belly and cleanses the heart, meaning to remove the revolts, the hatreds, the anger of those who bring petitions to him. The first thing he does is this. And he says that when this is done, sometimes the man becomes so satisfied, so relieved, that he even forgets his petition. In other words, he has the need, the obligation to listen to everyone with utmost attention. Simply giving everyone the attentive ear they seek is already an act of justice. If we don't consider that no part is so disadvantaged that it doesn't deserve to be heard. Listen with an attentive and impartial ear. Everything that involves a petition, all parties pay attention to it. Literally, the 17th maxim says, "Those who find are overwhelmed by injustice wish their heart to be cleansed even more than for the realization of what they came for." In other words, more than winning this case and getting revenge on someone or receiving material compensation, I wish for my heart to be free of revolt, of resentment, and my soul to be cleansed of selfishness. It's very beautiful because it gives a sacred role to a judge. He elevates the consciousness, and just by doing that, sometimes the conflict is already resolved. More than merely dealing with things, he is dealing with human beings, and he is also an educator. 21st maxim. Talk about, see how interesting. This is what Christian Jack comments on, and it's a fact. The respect that Egyptian society dedicated to women might not have been achieved even in today's times. And it is a unique civilization in this regard. And this 21st maxim will talk about the love and respect that a man should dedicate to a woman with whom he lives. Above all, the woman within Egypt, it is often said, is part of the K. She is a privileged vessel of creative energy because she is a space of creation. And she should be respected and honored with the same reverence given to the primordial creative energy. She is a part of the creative nature, therefore she deserves all the respect for that. She must be respected and preserved. Literally, look at what the book says, 21st maxim, do not decide for the woman, keep her away from the powerful who would exploit her. Your eye is the wind, gaze upon her and you will ensure she remains in your dwelling. The eye of the woman is the wind, meaning that through her flows all the sources of creative energy in the universe, passing through her body, her eye, her imagination. Respect so that you can connect with this source of creative energy that is the feminine. Women are relatives of nature, extremely creative, and life is greatly facilitated through their mediation, not only on the physical plane, but on all planes. On all planes, therefore, do not decide for her, protect her from violence, and be inspired by her. Look into her eye and see the flow of the wind. This is really beautiful, folks, just between us. I know that it's you who should find it beautiful, but I can't resist. It is very beautiful. 23rd maxim. A wise person should not listen to rumors, for they breed nothing but hatred. In other words, gossip, criticism, and hate speech. Here it is, the maxim of Pidal from 4,500 years ago, and we still haven't learned it. Literally, this maxim says, do not repeat a malicious rumor, do not even listen to it. This is the way of expressing oneself for those with a burning heart. In other words, the man who follows the path of the heart does not spread rumors. This is the way of expressing oneself for those who live with a burning heart. Let the malicious rumor be cast to the ground. Do not speak of it at all. When you speak it, even to criticize, you multiply it. In other words, rumor is the voice of the belly. Men who speak with the voice of the heart neither hear nor repeat it. Hatred travels through rumor. Do not listen to it nor multiply it. Pitta-hotep, my dear friends. We who have moved from the chariot to the jet plane have not yet moved beyond the same point as those who listened to Pitta-hotep and received this exhortation. Perhaps they had even progressed further on this point than we have. In other words, have we progressed or not? It seems that the machine has progressed, but not humanity. This is still very relevant and almost futuristic for us. The 24th maxim, the Word, speaks about the Word as a precious product. If you can't say anything useful, something that truly helps others, learn to keep silent. Silence is precious and occupies a space. Where you have no useful words to offer, it occupies that space with dignity. Avoid futile verbosity, in other words, turning words into mere noise, devoid of any message or meaning. Do not break the silence unless you are certain you can replace it with something better. In other words, be careful with the word. the word that the Greeks later called eros logos, the sacred word. The word as a whole was sacred to the Egyptians, and there should be great care in handling it so that it does not become mere noise. And noise is what obstructs our good listening. And you will see that good listening is one of the fundamental elements here. To know how to listen is to know how to understand. Therefore, the one who indulges in the verbosity of useless words creates noise and hinders the ears that wish to hear the voice of life. Or the song of life, as the light on the path would say. Literally, one must be an excellent craftsman, the one who speaks in a council. Speaking is more difficult than any other work. Whoever interprets this maxim correctly gives authority to the word. I recall a poem by Olevo Bilac, where he speaks about the crafting of words and the rigor involved. It's like a craftsman indeed, who builds, works so that it becomes the expression, the worthy packaging of a truth. Let it be the worthy packaging of a message that must be delivered. Let the packaging be worthy of the content. If you have a truth to convey, something that can bring comfort, that can offer help to the world, it should not be delivered carelessly. Wrap it appropriately, so that you may have the sacred word. And if you don't have it, keep silent. This is very beautiful and interesting as well. 25th maxim. A man endowed with true power commands respect because he always adopts a calm and serene language. Through the serenity of speech, a man overcomes the otherness of emotions. When two men speak in an agitated manner, neither of them is listening, even though both are talking. The serenity of speech denotes self-control and a man who knows what he has to say, who has something to say, meaning there is substance there, thus calming emotions and sharpening your ears, because here is a word worthy of the name. This man who knows how to use words does not give orders in vain, does not provoke belligerent reactions with what he says, and does not succumb to vanity. Imagine that man whose words never offend, never provoke his vanity, and never disorient anyone. This was the ideal of the wise, the sacred word. Literally, those who are sad at heart during the journey will not find a single happy moment. Who is frivolous at heart will not establish a home. Whoever follows their heart will be in harmony. The one who follows their heart has the right emotion, the right thought, and the right word for every moment. In other words, a man's entire life would be a reflection of whether he is listening to his heart or his gut. By looking from the outside and observing the behavior of a person you don't even know, if you are sober and not filled with hatred, meaning you are in a position to judge, you can see whether it is the heart speaking or the gut. The 26th maxim talks about the rightful use of Ka, the creative energy par excellence of the universe. Use it without feeling like its owner. Part of Ka is the life energy that was given to us to be in the world. Our time, our energy to act within time, that is Ka, that is a loan that has been given to us. Not for us to use it in any way we please, but for us to build something meaningful so that we can participate in the construction of this bridge between heaven and earth. In other words, our life is part of the precious, and it is not ours. It is a loan that, at a certain moment, we will have to account for and return to its rightful owner. Use it without feeling it is yours. Release it through love, through giving and not taking. In other words, the excellent channel for creative energy to flow through is the channel of love. Because the channel of love does not obstruct, it does not cause leaks, nor diversions that cause this energy to be lost along the way, like a hose full of holes where the water is lost and only half of the water that was emitted reaches the end. A man who is guided by base feelings, a man who listens to the voice of the belly. Your energy is entirely lost along the way. The channel of love is the most suitable for ensuring that the energy of Ka is not lost and reaches its rightful destination. Connected to inner peace, it is what makes love arise. Interesting, isn't it? In other words, this power to create in the world. The powerful man creates, among other things, genuine feelings. The weak, or those who squander their energy, do not have genuine feelings. And the first thing they lack is precisely love. Love takes effort. It is not for the weak, nor for those who waste their energy on just anything. For them, there are passions, dependencies, and needs. But true love is not like that. True love was made to be a channel, so that the energy rises to its highest levels, to build noble things. And only those who have noble intentions and the power to realize them can channel true love. And just that alone could be a whole lecture, folks. I love this topic of love. This conception of Egypt has a lot of things we could discuss. Unfortunately, it's not possible right now. Peace comes from your creative power, Ka. Hostility comes from the enemy, that is, of disorder, of chaos. It is the power that makes love grow. This is literally in the 26th maxim, 30th maxim. Foolish and stupid is the one who relies on fortune and material goods. They're gifts from God, tools. Everything that is truly yours, as we've mentioned in other talks, cannot be taken away from you. What will inevitably be taken from you is not yours. Naive is the one who trusts in illusions, who believes they will provide some security, that they will be a crutch to lean on. One should not extract from these things that are mere tools offered by the divine for us to accomplish a work. There arises a sense of possession or selfishness. If you have means, if you have things, if you have wealth, they were lent to you like a toolbox for you to build something real. They are not truly yours. They are here today, maybe they won't be tomorrow, maybe they'll return the day after tomorrow, and so it goes. Perhaps they become unstable. When you no longer find the meaning of your life in them, when you no longer depend on them, perhaps they will stop fluctuating. But as long as you place the purpose of your life in these material things, in these riches, they will come and go, so that you realize they are shadows, that they are illusory. So, just a loan, for you to build real things through it. Literally, do not place your trust in your heart in the accumulation of material goods. For what has been bestowed upon you is a gift from God, one of the many things created in the manifested world with a purpose. If you try to twist them into another meaning, they cease to exist, they cease to be, because they lose their purpose. And things that are not endowed with meaning vanish, like the shadows they are. They fulfill no purpose, they tend to disappear on the stage of illusions in the manifested world. They exist there when they serve the real. Even our own personality exists when it serves the real. When it no longer serves anything real, it dies even if the body continues to live for some time. 34th maxim, we're almost done. The wise should be radiant and emit light throughout their existence. Whoever wields power should leave only a trace, in such a way that when a person, a leader, has passed through here, people look and see. Benevolence and kindness. This is the trace of the great ones. Benevolence and kindness benefited the world, brought more unity, brought more light, because good is exactly what unites. Literally, the 34th maxim says, benevolence is the memorial of a man for the years that come after the exercise of power. Be goodness, it is the memorial. The only thing that will remain from your time on earth, if anything remains, is the memorial of the good you brought to the world, the channel you were for good to reach the world. The Tao Te Ching speaks about this in a very similar way. I won't delve into it here as it would take too much of our time, but it talks a lot about the wise ones of the past, where the only thing we know about them is that they existed, did what they had to do, and benefited the world without any need for affirmation of their personalities. 35th maxim. One must truly understand the nature of those beside us so that our assets endure. Nothing counts more than virtue. In other words, seeking to have someone by your side who is famous, rich, or has status, you have nothing by your side. When you have a virtuous person, you have something very real, both grow. And then there will be real gain, both grow. In other words, seek the company of the good, which is a recommendation from so many traditions throughout history. Literally, the 35th maxim says, "The virtue of the Son of Man will be useful to him." It will be the only thing that will be useful to him. A fulfilled nature, a properly fulfilled human nature, will be a memorial. In other words, he will be remembered for this. If you don't have this, you won't be remembered for anything. For those familiar with Marcus Aurelius in his Meditations, he starts by talking about those who once thought themselves great and who, in the historical moment he lived in, were no longer remembered by anyone, no longer meant anything. The memorial of goodness. And that's how you choose those who stand by your side. This is the true beauty that should be considered. Because only someone's virtue is a real value that can promote the growth and maturation of a coexistence, a feeling, a relationship. Be it love, be it friendship, whatever it may be. And the epilogue. The epilogue is a bit long. It has 9 chapters, but I tried to summarize it here as much as possible. The 38th maxim, which is already within the epilogue, Tahotep promises success in everything one sets out to do in life for those who listen to his words of wisdom and follow them. Anything you do following these rules, you will achieve what you seek. As long as what you seek is in accordance with the rule of Mott. The greatest of riches is uprightness. And he asks, at this moment when he addresses the reader, that these words be passed on to posterity. A good example is effective for eternity. In other words, he has the confidence that as long as time endures, as long as humanity endures, these words will still hold true. See how man perceives the reality behind shadows and illusions. No matter how distant that future may be, it will still hold true. That is a wise person. Literally, the 38th says the following: one must teach a man what he should say to posterity. In other words, one must teach a man what message he should leave for the future. He who listens to this becomes a craftsman by listening. In other words, the one who listens to this advice becomes a craftsman. To begin crafting your word, your ideas, to have a legacy to leave for the future, for your spiritual children of various, countless generations. The knowledgeable person is wise because of what they know, and noble because of their way of acting. And the one who does so achieves a degree of eternity. Because nobility and wisdom will always be worthy of attentive ears, no matter how much time passes. While the trivialities and vulgarities of a historical moment sometimes pass with the speed of the wind. In the 39th maxim of the epilogue, he talks about listening and understanding, which is very interesting. Without this faculty of listening, there is no possible wisdom or justice. He will say that God loves those who understand the deep meaning of the transmitted teaching. They are his favorite children. The one who can grasp the deep meaning of the transmitted teaching, only they know perfect love. The one who knows how to love ideas also knows how to love all those beings who, in the manifested world, reflect them, partake in them, or bring them into the world, knows life in some dimension. And love, I once spoke about marriage in relation to this. Why is marriage made into a religious celebration? Why is it? We, in truth, build a bridge, reaching the other through the heart of God. There must be the presence of the sacred, because with just 2 bodies, both change. Only 2 emotions, they change throughout life and everything is lost. Every union is made before the sacred. Therefore, true love is born when you recognize the places where truth is reflected and identifies it. And as we love the truth, we love all the points where it reflects with a true and imperishable love. Something that today we can hardly believe exists. Literally, when listening is good, the word is good. Whoever listens is a master of the useful. Sometimes we are so blinded by selfishness that we just wait for the other person to stop talking so we can unload what we're thinking. We don't listen to anyone. See, the one who listens is the master of the beneficial. It is the heart that gives birth to your master. like the one who understands or the one who doesn't understand. In other words, it's the heart that decides whether you will understand or not. If you have a good connection with a voice worth listening to, you can become a good listener. And you can have a good understanding. Whoever listens is the one who understands what is said or loves to understand. Whoever reaches what is said. Their memory will remain in the mouths of the living who are on earth and those who will be. In other words, the one who has heard the voice of truth, the voice of God, the voice of Dharma for the Hindus, or of Mat here in Egypt. The one who has heard a bit of the law of the universe, of that which is imperishable, of that which is eternal, if he has heard and understood, his word will endure in the mouths of those who live and those who will live. It will not be forgotten. Because that word which is imbued with eternity tends to also chase after eternity in the world where it resides. Then, one fine day, when we think it is forgotten, a man goes out on the street and buys a piece of papyrus from a seller who doesn't even know what he's selling, nor does he know what he's buying. But this truth returns to light, and we are here with it. Do you realize what the projection of a man's will over time is? I want this word to reach posterity. And the will is so strong that it crosses 4,500 years and achieves its purpose. And we have his word here. And it is among those who live and those who will live. According to the will of a wise man named Tahutup. By the way, it's very interesting, I remembered here. A lecture I gave about a wonderful book as well, which is The Light on the Path, which says, reach understanding and only then will you reach the word. Until then, you only have noise. Reach understanding and only then will you reach the word. The 40th maxim. To educate a spiritual child, one must touch him, the one who listens. It is about awakening within him the being that listens. In other words, only then can you educate him. You don't speak to a personality, because that's just training. You speak to that essence there, which is dormant and which you must awaken, because only it is capable of listening. Only it is capable of understanding, assimilating, integrating as its response to the world, this voice that is the voice of Mat. Only the one who can listen is the one who truly shapes the human being. This cover. She is trained, not formed, she is informed. In other words, when educating a spiritual child, you have to speak to a point that is dormant within them, you have to awaken it. The one who listens, the one who understands, the one who applies. Discover this and awaken it within the other. If it is awakened within you, it is possible. Literally, nurture in your child that which listens. In the hearts of the noble, he will be a man of quality, worthy of trust. Deviation penetrates into the one who does not listen. The knowledgeable one rises in the morning to maintain his balance, while the ignorant one, who does not listen, is trapped. The one who listens is never alone, never lost. They always have a reference for direction. The one who listens has the discernment to separate truth from illusion, while the one who is deaf to any deep understanding is always trapped by circumstances. The 41st maxim speaks of the ignorant who believes that their ignorance is knowledge, being the one who turns things upside down, acts in a detestable manner, and possesses only an appearance of life, for they feed daily on what brings death. In other words, the one who loses such a sense of direction that they begin to judge things backwards. Plato talks about this in his Republic, in his forms of government. In other words, he is so disconnected from any reference point that he judges things backwards, and he believes that his ignorance is enlightenment and knowledge. And he considers himself to be the well-informed and wise man of society, when in reality, the only thing that speaks within him is the voice of the belly. Literally, he, the ignorant one, considers knowledge as ignorance, the useful as detestable. He lives by what makes him die. In other words, he is a living dead every day. The ignorant is just that, a living dead every single day. He lives by feeding on and offering to others that which brings death, in other words, a poison. Stealing more and more of their ka, their energy, the life that was gifted to them. which becomes obstructed because the channel of the heart has been closed. The 42nd maxim states that in the one who knows how to understand, who knows how to comprehend, who knows how to listen, the divine prevails over the human. Which, of course, within him is permanently the voice of truth, the voice of law, the voice of Mat. Therefore, the one who knows how to listen, who knows how to comprehend, in them the divine prevails over the human. And they can renew this as many times as necessary and convey the essence of the teachings intact for the future. In other words, the one who is in touch with the source can always convey it, using the words of their time, but immortal and intact throughout the ages. The same eternal voice of wisdom. Literally, a son who understands is a follower of Horus. He will transmit the same message to his sons, renewing his father's teaching. Every man receives teaching according to his actions, meaning no one receives more than they deserve. No one receives a glass of water larger than their thirst. And sharpening our thirst for truth is our duty. Shape your character. Do not give free course to destruction. Consolidate uprightness, and your spiritual descendants will live. In other words, if you want to educate someone, shape their character, do not give free rein to the voices of the flesh, instill righteousness in them, and your legacy will thrive and spread into the future. 43rd and 44th, we're almost at the end. He talks about the difficulty of using words, whose mastery requires uprightness and coherence. The other day, I was talking with a public speaking teacher about the difference between oratory and rhetoric. That's exactly what he's saying here. The mastery of using words depends on uprightness and coherence. The faithful disciple will be among the noble, for he will pronounce elevated words, words that elevate those who hear them. To the good son, it corresponds to go forward and make the received message bear fruit, do more than what was prescribed to him. In other words, I receive all the wisdom from those who came before me, and I add a bit of my own experience from what has worked in my life, and I go beyond what was prescribed. I offer a little more to the next generation, and in this way, humanity moves forward. Otherwise, we all remain stagnant. Our life means adding value. It consists of adding value, the value that was given to us, the value we received from the tradition that preceded us. And not taking away value, which is what we see most often today. Literally, this beautiful art talks about a father and his spiritual son, meaning a master and his disciple. Literally, the 43rd maxim says the following: listen, if you wish to endure in the mouths of those who understand. Listen, if you wish to endure in the mouths of those who understand. Speak only when you have mastered the art. Let your testimony be complete in the presence of your master. Act in such a way that your master says, "This is a son." And those who hear him say, "Blessed is that master through whom this son was born." Rest your heart when you speak. Pronounce only elevated words, so that the noble people who listen to you say, "How beautiful is what comes from your mouth." How beautiful, folks, how beautiful this is. Honor those who came before us and gifted us with words of truth. Expand this and gift it to the present and the future. Honoring the gift we received and carrying it forward, enriched with added value. As I often say, a phrase from Gibran, we must be stations of enrichment for the gifts of life. Wisdom that we received from our ancestors, who were noble, who were good. Add a bit of the value from our own lives and ensure it doesn't get lost. Isaac Newton, in a letter written to Robert Hooke, said, "If I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of my ancestors." This phrase, which is so recent compared to the maxims of PETA, reflects the same spirit. Well, finally, in the epilogue. Pitta-Hotep informs that the pharaoh was pleased with these words, was happy with this text, approved them, and that Pitta-Hotep, at 110 years old, concludes these maxims and acknowledges with gratitude that all his wisdom comes from the king, not the physical person of the king, but the investiture of the king as a bridge between heaven and earth, between the spiritual Maat and the Maat of the concrete world. Therefore, he dedicates and expresses gratitude for having established and conquered the understanding of the truth and hearing the truth. And he insists on the importance of these maxims and the necessity of passing them on. In a certain way, at this moment, within the humble scope of our possibilities, we are answering the request of the wise old Tahotep. And you can also continue fulfilling this request. In fact, it is an extremely noble mission to give voice through our lives to the words of a sage, enriching them, carrying them forward, adding our own value. Honor the truths with practice, said Helena Blavatsky. Socrates used to say, only the knowledge that makes us better is useful. Better than knowing 1,000 things is to live a few. This is what I leave for you to reflect upon. It's yet another sacred and wonderful text. Another precious piece, another jewel from this heritage we received from the past. I hope it is useful for you. May it be heard by ears. Learn to listen. May it be understood. Learn to understand. May it be replicated. Know how to generously give the finest jewels you possess. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone.